The recreation bay of the warship Nexus Prime buzzed with quiet activity. Soldiers from different worlds sat at metal tables, some cleaning weapons, others playing games that made no sense to anyone but their own species. The room smelled of recycled air and the strange mix of alien foods. Commander stretched his long reptilian neck and flicked his forked tongue. His green scales caught the artificial light as he moved. The Saurian had served in 3 wars and earned his rank through careful planning and patient strikes. He never rushed into battle. His people were known for their tactical minds. "Look at this," Lieutenant Al clicked in her musical voice. The insect-like had 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in multiple directions at once. Her thin body was covered in smooth black chitin that reflected the room's lights. She had pulled up a data screen showing files from Earth. Human cultural archives, their military history. Sergeant turned his crystal head toward the screen. The N was built like a walking gemstone with faceted surfaces that split light into rainbows. His people were nearly indestructible, able to withstand impacts that would crush most other beings. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. What do their records show? Al's mandibles clicked in what her species used for laughter. Stories, just stories. They call them myths and legends. She pulled up file after file. Listen to this one. A human named Hercules who fought a creature with multiple heads. Every time he cut off one head, 2 more grew back. The story says he defeated it anyway. His pupils narrowed to slits. Impossible. No single warrior could face such odds. There are hundreds more, Al continued. She scrolled through the files. A man named Achilles who could not be hurt anywhere except his heel. Warriors who fought entire armies alone. Humans who lifted mountains and wrestled with gods. His crystal body rang like a bell as he shook with laughter. Delusional. My people have real military records going back 10,000 years. Detailed tactical analyses, casualty reports, resource management data. These humans write fantasy and call it history. Look at this one, said, pointing a clawed finger at the screen. 300 human soldiers holding off an army of 1 million. The story claims they fought to the last man and nearly won. His tongue flicked out again. Pure fiction. The mathematics make it impossible. Al brought up more files. Here are stories about humans who could run faster than sound, lift ships with their bare hands, and survive in the vacuum of space. They have tales of mortals who challenged their own gods and won. Her 4 arms gestured wildly. How did such a deluded species ever achieve? Perhaps that explains why they were the last to join the galactic community, suggested. His crystalline form pulsed with soft light. While we were building real empires, they were telling each other impossible stories. The 3 aliens continued reading through the human archives. They found stories of dragons being slayed by knights, of ordinary people performing miraculous feats of strength and courage, of humans who refused to surrender even when facing certain death. Each tale seemed more ridiculous than the last. Their entire culture is based on these power fantasies, observed. No wonder their military tactics are so unpredictable. They probably think they can win through sheer force of will. My hive mind gives me access to the tactical knowledge of millions, Al said proudly. We coordinate perfectly in battle. These humans seem to think one individual can make a difference against impossible odds. Laughable, agreed. My crystalline structure can withstand plasma cannon fire. I am a living weapon. But even I would not face an army alone. These humans live in a dream world. The aliens were so absorbed in their mockery that they did not notice the human who entered the recreation bay. She moved quietly, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. She was shorter than the aliens but carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had seen real combat. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos had been a Marine for 20 years. Her dark hair was streaked with gray and pulled back in a tight bun. Scars crossed her brown hands and arms like a roadmap of battles fought and survived. Her uniform was clean but showed signs of wear. Most notably, her eyes held something the aliens had not seen in their own people's gaze. It was not fear or anger or even determination. It was something deeper and more dangerous. Santos walked to the food dispenser and selected a simple meal. She turned and noticed the aliens gathered around the data screen showing human cultural files. Her expression did not change, but she moved closer. Finding our stories interesting, she asked in a calm voice. Turned his reptilian head toward her. If you can call them that, we were just reviewing your species' mythology, quite entertaining fiction. Fiction? Santos set her meal tray on a nearby table and looked at the screen. She could see files about Achilles, Hercules, and the Spartan warriors at Thermopylae. Surely you don't believe these tales, Al said, her compound eyes studying the human. Humans fighting gods, single warriors defeating armies. These are children's stories. Santos was quiet for a moment. She picked up a piece of synthetic fruit from her tray and took a bite. You think they're made up? Obviously, chimed like a crystal bell. The physics alone make most of these impossible. Your species seems to confuse wishful thinking with history. Santos nodded slowly. I see. She chewed her food thoughtfully. So you've studied our military capabilities. We've reviewed your technical specifications, replied. Standard bipedal frame, limited physical strength, short, no natural armor or weapons. You compensate well with technology, but your biological limitations are clear. Interesting assessment, Santos said. She finished her fruit and stood up. Would you be interested in a friendly training exercise sometime? Nothing serious, just curious to see how our different fighting styles compare. The three aliens exchanged glances. This could be an opportunity to demonstrate the superiority of evolved warrior species over humans and their ridiculous mythological thinking. We would be honored, said formally. When would be convenient? Tomorrow works for me, Santos replied. Standard combat simulation. You can choose the scenario. She paused. Live rounds or training ammunition. The aliens looked at each other again, slightly confused by the question. Training rounds naturally, Al answered. Santos smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but there was something in it that made the aliens slightly uncomfortable without knowing why. Training rounds it is, she said. I look forward to it. As she walked away with her meal tray, the aliens watched her go. Something about the humans' quiet confidence bothered them, but they could not put their finger on what it was. The next day, the four soldiers met in Training Bay 7. The large room could simulate any battlefield environment through advanced holographic technology. Right now, it was set to a basic gray grid pattern while they prepared for the exercise. Commander checked his plasma rifle and adjusted his tactical harness. His reptilian fingers moved with practiced precision. We should establish the parameters for our demonstration, he said to the other aliens. Something that will clearly show the difference between evolved military thinking and human fantasy. Lieutenant Al's 4 arms worked simultaneously, preparing her equipment. The specialized in coordinated attacks, using multiple weapons at once while her hive-mind connection provided tactical data from thousands of other soldiers across the galaxy. I suggest an urban hostage rescue scenario. It requires precision, coordination, and careful planning, not the kind of situation where human mythological thinking would be useful. Sergeant's crystalline body rang softly as he moved. His people did not use conventional weapons. His diamond-hard fists and nearly indestructible form were weapons enough. Agreed. We will demonstrate proper military technique. Santos entered the bay carrying a standard human assault rifle and basic combat gear. Her equipment looked primitive compared to the aliens' advanced technology. She listened quietly as they discussed the simulation parameters. An urban rescue scenario sounds good, she said. Standard rules. Minimize civilian casualties, neutralize all hostiles, extract the hostages alive. Precisely, replied. Though I suspect you will find it challenging. This type of operation requires patience and tactical precision, not the reckless heroics your species seems to favor. Santos set down her gear and began checking her weapon. Mind if I tell you a story while we prep, since you enjoyed our mythology so much yesterday? The aliens exchanged amused looks. Please do, Al clicked. We found your cultural archives quite entertaining. Santos pulled back the charging handle on her rifle and let it snap forward. This one's about a king named. He ruled a city-state called Sparta about 2,500 years ago. Small place, maybe 300,000 people total. A minor kingdom, observed. Hardly significant on a galactic scale. True, Santos agreed. She began stripping and cleaning her weapon with movements so automatic she did not need to look at what she was doing. But had a problem. The largest army in the known world was marching toward his home, the Persian Empire under the Great. Some historians say it was over 1 million soldiers. Impossible, chimed. No pre-industrial civilization could field and supply such a force. Santos shrugged. Maybe the numbers got exaggerated over time, but it was definitely the largest army anyone in that region had ever seen, had been conquering everything in his path for years. His forces covered the land like a dark sea. She reassembled her rifle and loaded a training magazine. The Persian king sent messengers to Sparta demanding submission. Earth and water, the traditional symbols of surrender. Most of the Greek cities gave in without a fight. Sensible, Al commented. Why waste lives in an unwinnable battle? That's what most people thought, Santos said, but saw things differently. See, Spartans had this saying, come back with your shield or on it. It meant you either won the battle or died fighting. No middle ground. Flicked his tongue thoughtfully. Primitive thinking. A good general preserves his forces for battles he can win. Santos finished her equipment check and looked up at the aliens. Took 300 of his best warriors to a place called Thermopylae. It was a narrow mountain pass, maybe 50 feet wide at the narrowest point. The only route large armies could use to march south into Greece. A defensive position, observed. That shows some tactical sense. The idea was simple, Santos continued. 300 Spartans would hold the pass against the entire Persian army, give the other Greek cities time to prepare their defenses. Al's mandibles clicked in disbelief. 300 against hundreds of thousands. Even in a narrow pass, the mathematics are impossible. The Persians could simply overwhelm them with sheer numbers. That's what everyone thought would happen, Santos agreed. Certainly expected it. He gave one last chance to surrender, told him to lay down his weapons. A reasonable demand, said. Santos smiled the same quiet smile from the day before, answered, come and take them. The aliens were silent for a moment, processing this response. It made no tactical sense to them. So what happened? Al asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer would be disappointing. The battle lasted 3 days, Santos said. Wave after wave of Persian soldiers hit those 300 Spartans. The narrow pass meant the Persians could not use their numerical advantage. They could only attack with a few dozen men at a time. She stood up and shouldered her rifle. The Spartans had trained for this their entire lives. Every one of them was a master warrior. They fought in perfect formation, shields locked together, spears pointing forward. When one man fell, another stepped up to take his place. They held for 3 days, asked, his crystal form pulsing with interest despite himself. Sent his best troops, his personal guard, the Immortals, elite forces from across his empire. Nothing worked. The Spartans just kept fighting. Some reports say they killed 20,000 Persians while barely losing any of their own men. His pupils narrowed. How did it end? They could not hold forever. Santos' expression grew serious. A local Greek showed the Persians a mountain path around the pass. They attacked from behind while another force hit from the front. Betrayed by their own people, Al observed. How typical. Even then, they didn't surrender, Santos continued. They fought until the last man fell, died with a dozen arrows in his body, still swinging his sword. When it was over, was so angry he had head cut off and stuck on a spear. A pointless waste, declared. They all died for nothing. Santos checked her gear one final time. Did they? See, those 3 days gave the other Greek cities time to prepare. The Persian army had lost momentum and morale. When finally reached the main Greek cities, they were ready for him. His navy got destroyed at Salamis. His land forces got crushed at. She looked at each alien in turn. Within a year, the man who commanded the largest army in history was running back to Persia with the survivors. The invasion failed. Interesting story, said diplomatically, but hardly realistic. 300 men cannot achieve such results against a professional army. No, Santos asked. Well, shall we run that simulation now? I'm curious to see how you handle overwhelming odds. The aliens nodded confidently. They had trained with the best military minds of their species. They understood tactics, coordination, and proper battlefield management. This would be a simple demonstration of evolved military thinking over primitive human fantasies. Computer called out, "Load Urban Rescue Scenario 7, multiple hostiles, civilian presence, standard difficulty." The gray grid around them shimmered and transformed into a detailed city street. Buildings rose on all sides, with narrow alleys and multiple levels. Holographic enemies appeared in windows and doorways. Simulated civilians cowered in buildings marked as the hostage location. Who goes first? Santos asked pleasantly. We will demonstrate proper technique, Al declared. Observe and learn. The 3 aliens moved to the starting position. Santos stepped back to watch, her expression unreadable. The 3 aliens moved into position at the edge of the simulated city. The computer had generated a complex scenario, 12 hostages held in a 3-story building, with approximately 40 enemy combatants spread throughout the surrounding area. Rooftop snipers, street-level guards, and internal security made it a challenging but solvable tactical problem. Commander extended his neck and surveyed the battlefield with cold reptilian patience. Standard approach. Al, use your hive mind connection to coordinate a drone sweep. I want enemy positions marked and movement patterns analyzed. You take point and draw their fire. Your crystal structure can handle their weapons. Lieutenant Al's compound eyes tracked multiple targets simultaneously while her brain connected to the tactical network of her species. Data flowed through her consciousness from thousands of soldiers across the galaxy, providing instant analysis of optimal attack vectors. Drone deployment complete, she clicked softly. I count 38 hostiles, 12 on upper floors, 16 at street level, 10 mobile patrols. Civilian signatures confirmed in the central building, basement level. Sergeant's faceted body reflected the simulated sunlight as he moved toward the first enemy position. Training rounds sparked off his crystalline surface without effect. He returned fire with precise energy bursts from his integrated weapon systems, eliminating targets with mechanical efficiency. The aliens worked like a perfectly calibrated machine, flanked around buildings using shadows and cover, his patient approach allowing him to eliminate sentries without alerting others. Al coordinated overwatch with her drone swarm while providing suppressing fire with her 4-armed weapon configuration. Each movement was calculated, each shot placed with mathematical precision. Santos watched from the sidelines, her expression unchanged. She took mental notes as the aliens demonstrated their tactical doctrines. The Saurians favored patience and careful positioning. They relied on information superiority and coordinated attacks. The ends served as mobile cover, their near-invulnerability making them ideal for frontal assaults. 22 minutes later, the simulation ended successfully. All hostiles neutralized, all civilians rescued alive, minimal collateral damage to the surrounding structures. A textbook operation executed with professional competence. Excellent work, the computer announced. Mission success rating 87%. Time to completion 22 minutes 15 seconds. Casualties 0. Nodded with satisfaction. Standard military doctrine produces predictable results, proper planning, coordination, and execution. Your turn, human, Al said, her mandibles clicking with amusement. Let us see how your mythological thinking handles the same scenario. Santos stepped forward and checked her rifle one more time. She carried no advanced technology, no drone swarms, no hive mind connection. Just basic human military equipment that looked primitive compared to alien gear. Computer, reset the scenario, she said calmly. Same parameters. The simulation refreshed, placing her at the same starting position the aliens had used. The holographic enemies reset to their original positions. The hostages returned to the basement of the central building. Everything was identical to the previous run. Santos stood at the edge of the simulated city and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, something had changed. The aliens could not identify exactly what was different, but her posture had shifted subtly. Her breathing had slowed. Most notably, her eyes held a look they had not seen before. Begin simulation, the computer announced. Santos moved. The aliens had expected her to advance cautiously, perhaps trying to copy their tactics. Instead, she sprinted directly toward the center of the enemy formation. Training rounds sparked around her as she ran, but she seemed to anticipate where each shot would be fired. She weaved between bullets like she could see them coming. Her first target was a rooftop sniper positioned in a second-story window. Instead of taking cover and returning fire, Santos leaped onto a parked vehicle, then onto a fire escape, and finally through the window itself. The aliens lost sight of her for 30 seconds. When she emerged on the roof, 3 snipers had been eliminated and she was carrying one of their rifles. Impossible, chimed. No human has the physical capability to make those jumps. Santos dropped from the roof onto the street below, rolling to absorb the impact. She had fallen nearly 20 feet, but popped up immediately and continued moving. A squad of enemy soldiers rounded the corner and opened fire. Santos dove behind a concrete barrier that should have provided minimal cover. What happened next? Everything the aliens thought they knew about human limitations. Santos emerged from behind the barrier in a series of movements that seemed to flow like water. She fired her captured rifle while moving, each shot finding its target despite the impossible angles. When the weapon ran empty, she threw it at an enemy's head, drew her sidearm, and continued firing without missing a beat. How is she moving like that? Al demanded. Human reaction time should not allow for such precision under stress. An enemy threw a grenade at Santos' position. She caught it in midair, counted off 2 seconds, and threw it back through the window it had come from. The explosion eliminated 4 more hostiles. This cannot be accurate simulation data, hissed. The computer must be malfunctioning. But Santos was not finished. She reached the central building where the hostiles had their strongest defensive position. Instead of finding a way around their kill zones, she charged straight through the front door. The aliens watched in amazement as she moved through the building like a force of nature. She used furniture as weapons and weapons as tools. When she ran out of ammunition, she picked up enemy guns. When those ran empty, she used knives. When the knives broke, she used her bare hands. Each room she entered erupted in controlled violence that lasted only seconds before falling silent. The hostage room was in the basement, guarded by the remaining enemy forces in a defensive position that should have been impossible to assault alone. Santos found a different solution. She improvised an explosive device from cleaning supplies found in a storage closet, used it to blow a hole in the floor above the enemy position, and dropped through the opening directly into their midst. The final combat lasted less than a minute. When the dust settled, All enemies were neutralized, and Santos was escorting the hostages to safety. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Mission success rating 96%. Time to completion 8 minutes 43 seconds. Casualties 0. The aliens stared at the readouts in stunned silence. Santos had completed the same mission in less than half their time, with a higher success rating, using equipment that was technologically inferior by several generations. How was all could manage? Santos wiped simulated blood and dust from her face. She was breathing hard, but appeared largely uninjured despite the chaos she had just survived. "You asked about our myths," she said quietly. "The thing is, we don't really think of them as myths." "Explain," Al demanded, her compound eyes still tracking the simulation data scrolling past. Santos sat down on a nearby crate and began cleaning her rifle again. "Take and his 300 Spartans. You said it was impossible for so few to hold against so many." "It is impossible," insisted. "Basic mathematics prove it cannot happen." "Maybe," Santos said, "but it did happen. The battle at Thermopylae is historical fact, not mythology. We have records from multiple sources, including Persian accounts. 300 Spartans really did hold off the largest army in the ancient world for 3 days. She reassembled her weapon with practiced efficiency. "See, that's what you don't understand about humans. When we tell stories about heroes doing impossible things, we're not making them up. We're remembering them." "You are saying these myths are historical?" asked. "I'm saying that when humans decide something needs to be done, we find a way to do it," Santos replied. "Doesn't matter what the odds are. Doesn't matter if it should be impossible. If innocent people need protecting, if freedom needs defending, if good needs to triumph over evil, we become whatever we need to be." She stood up and shouldered her rifle. Wasn't a myth. He was a Tuesday, just another day when someone had to make a choice between doing what was safe and doing what was right. The aliens looked at their own simulation results, then at Santos' scores, then back at the human who had just redefined their understanding of what was possible. "Your species is dangerous," Al said quietly. Santos smiled that same unsettling smile, "only if you're on the wrong side." The 3 aliens spent the next hour studying Santos' simulation data, trying to understand what they had witnessed. Every tactical analysis they ran came back with the same conclusion. What she had accomplished should have been impossible for a single operator, especially one using primitive equipment. Commander's reptilian brain worked through the problem methodically. The simulation must have been calibrated incorrectly for human physiology, he concluded. There is no other explanation. "I ran full diagnostics," Lieutenant Al replied, her 4 arms manipulating multiple data streams simultaneously. The simulation parameters were identical to ours. Same enemy positions, same weapon capabilities, same physical laws. The only variable was the operator. Sergeant's crystal body pulsed with frustrated light patterns. "Request a more challenging scenario, something that will reveal the limitations of human capability." Santos had been quietly eating her lunch while the aliens debated. She looked up from her meal with mild interest. "You want to try something harder?" "Much harder," hissed. "A scenario where raw aggression cannot substitute for proper tactics." "I have some suggestion," Santos said. She stood and walked to the simulation controls. "Computer, load scenario designations Hotel 77 and Mike 42. Run them in sequence." The aliens checked the scenario descriptions and exchanged concerned looks. Hotel 77 was a defensive siege simulation designed for full platoons. Mike 42 was an extraction mission in hostile territory with no support and limited ammunition. Both were rated for elite special forces units, not individual operators. "These scenarios are designed for teams of 20 to 30 soldiers," Al protested. "I know," Santos replied calmly. "Should be interesting. Mind if I tell you about a few more of our myths while we set this up?" Before the aliens could object, Santos began another story. There was an American soldier named Murphy. Small guy, maybe 5 feet 5 inches tall, barely weighed 150 pounds. During the Second Great War on Earth, his unit got pinned down by German forces. Entire companies of enemy soldiers, plus tanks and artillery. She adjusted the simulation parameters while she talked. Murphy sent his men back to safety, then climbed onto a burning tank destroyer that was about to explode, used its machine gun to hold off the entire German advance for over an hour, by himself. Propaganda declared, no individual could face such odds. When the ammunition ran out, he pulled out his carbine and kept fighting, Santos continued, ignoring the interruption. Called in artillery strikes on his own position because the Germans were so close. When his unit finally counterattacked, they found him still standing in the middle of a field covered with enemy bodies. His crystal structure rang with disbelief. The story becomes more ridiculous with each detail. Santos finished the simulation setup and turned to face the aliens. Murphy killed or wounded over 200 German soldiers that day, single-handedly stopped an entire battalion advance. The U.S. military gave him their highest honor for valor. He went on to star in movies about his own experiences because directors thought the real events were too unbelievable for fiction. More human fantasy, Al dismissed. Here's another one, Santos said. Finnish sniper named. During the Winter War, he killed over 500 enemy soldiers in less than 100 days, using a basic rifle with iron sights in temperatures 40 degrees below zero while outnumbered 100 to 1. She walked to her equipment pile and began selecting different gear. The Soviet Union sent entire squads specifically to hunt him down. They used counter-snipers, artillery, even bombed areas where they thought he might be hiding. Nothing worked, just kept killing their soldiers from impossible distances in impossible conditions. These numbers are statistically impossible, protested. Santos strapped on different armor and checked a heavier weapon. A Soviet sniper finally shot him in the face with an explosive round. Should have killed him instantly. Woke up in the hospital 11 days later when the war ended. Half his face was gone, but he lived for 60 more years. And I suppose you believe these stories? Al asked. I believe in documented military records, Santos replied. Both Murphy and have their achievements by their respective armed forces, multiple witnesses, official investigations, physical evidence. These weren't stories told around campfires. They were real people doing impossible things when impossible things needed to be done. She selected ammunition and additional equipment while continuing to talk. Then, there's the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Jewish resistance fighters with almost no weapons or training held off elite German SS troops for nearly a month. They were supposed to be eliminated in 3 days. Santos closed her equipment pack and stood. Something about her demeanor had changed again. The aliens could see it but could not define what was different. The thing about humans, she said quietly, is that we have what military psychologists call heroic dissociation. Most species have one basic psychological state for combat, fight or flight, as simple as that. But humans, we have layers. She walked to the starting position for the first simulation. There's the normal state where we follow training and doctrine like you do. There's the stress state where adrenaline takes over and we become faster and stronger. There's the survival state where normal limitations stop applying. The simulation environment began loading around them. A fortified enemy compound with multiple defensive layers, automated weapon systems, and overwhelming numbers of hostile forces. And then there's the mythic state, Santos continued. That's where the impossible becomes routine, where physics become optional, where one person really can stand against an army and win. Mythic state? Asked, his crystal form reflecting the harsh lighting of the simulated combat zone. Santos checked her weapon one final time. It's what accessed at Thermopylae, what Murphy found on that burning tank destroyer, what every human hero throughout history has tapped into when everything was on the line. She looked at each alien in turn. See, our myths aren't fantasies about what we wish we could do. They're instruction manuals for what we can do when we choose to become legendary. Begin first simulation, the computer announced. Santos moved toward the enemy compound, and the aliens watched her transformation. Her movements became fluid, almost supernatural. She was no longer fighting like a normal soldier following tactical doctrine. She was fighting like a force of nature given human form. The first defensive line fell within minutes. Santos moved through enemy fire like she could see every bullet's path. She used their own weapons against them, turned their fortifications into traps, converted their numerical advantage into tactical confusion. How is she predicting their movements? Al demanded, watching her tactical displays. She's not predicting, realized with growing horror. She's making them move where she wants them to go. The second simulation was even more impressive. Santos infiltrated deep into enemy territory, rescued high-value targets from a heavily defended prison, and fought her way out through overwhelming opposition. But this time she fought differently. Where the first simulation had been fury and aggression, this one was patience and precision. She's changing fighting styles, observed. Completely different approach but equally effective. Santos completed both simulations with perfect scores in record time, using tactics that everything the aliens thought they knew about warfare. You asked how it's possible, she said afterward, sitting down to clean her weapons again. The answer is simple. When you really need to save someone, protect something, or stop evil from winning, humans become whatever the situation requires. We channel the spirits of every hero who came before us. She looked up at the three aliens. Our mythology isn't fantasy. It's our genetic memory of what we're capable of when we decide to be heroes. The alarm klaxons cut through their discussion like a blade through silk. Red lights flashed throughout the training bay as the ship's automated systems broadcast an emergency alert. All hands to battle stations. Civilian transport under attack in Sector 7. Multiple hostile vessels confirmed. This is not a drill. Commander's reptilian instincts kicked in immediately. His species had evolved from predators, and the sound of combat alerts triggered ancient responses. Pirates, he hissed, checking his sidearm. Probably hitting a merchant convoy. Lieutenant Al's compound eyes tracked multiple data streams as her hive mind connected to the ship's tactical network. Confirmed. Civilian passenger liner Serenity Dawn, registry number TG4471. 378 souls aboard, including 47 children, under attack by 5 pirate vessels of unknown configuration. Sergeant's crystal body resonated with harmonic frequencies as he accessed his weapon systems. Estimated time to intercept. 12 minutes at maximum burn, the ship's captain announced over the intercom. All available personnel report to deployment bays. We have civilians in immediate danger. Santos was already moving before the announcement finished. She grabbed her combat gear and headed for the door at a dead run. The aliens followed, struggling to keep up with her pace. Standard rescue protocol called out as they reached the deployment bay. Establish perimeter, neutralize threats, extract civilians to safety. No, Santos said firmly, pulling on her combat armor. Not standard anything. Those are real people dying out there. Real children crying for their parents. Real families about to be torn apart by scum who think profit matters more than life. She checked her weapons with movements too fast for the aliens to follow clearly. Every action was precise, economical, deadly efficient. This isn't a simulation where we get to try again if we make mistakes. This is where myths are born. The deployment bay doors opened to reveal the void of space punctuated by weapons fire. In the distance, they could see the civilian liner Serenity Dawn listing badly, its hull breached in multiple places. Pirate vessels swarmed around it like predators around wounded prey. "Boarding pods ready," the bay chief announced. "You have 6 minutes before that liner's life support fails completely." Santos strapped herself into the lead pod without hesitation. 6 minutes, she looked at the aliens through her helmet visor. Watch and learn what humans do when innocent people need saving. The pod launched with violent acceleration that would have knocked most beings unconscious. Santos rode it like she was born for vacuum warfare. Through the pod's sensors, the aliens watched her prepare for what was essentially a suicide mission. The liner had been boarded. Pirates were moving through the corridors, herding passengers into cargo holds where they would be sorted for ransom or slavery. The ship's security forces had been overwhelmed in the first minutes of the attack. Santos' pod breached the liner's hull in the most dangerous possible location, directly amidst the heaviest concentration of pirates. She emerged from the pod into a corridor filled with armed hostiles who had been expecting easy prey, not a one-person rescue force. What happened next redefined the aliens' understanding of what was possible in personal combat. Santos moved through the ship like a mythical force given flesh. She was no longer bound by normal human limitations. Every shot she fired found its target. Every movement flowed with supernatural grace. When her rifle ran empty, she drew her sidearm. When that ran dry, she picked up pirate weapons. When those failed, she used her hands and anything else she could find. "Impossible," Al whispered, watching the tactical feeds. "She's fighting 30 pirates simultaneously in close quarters." "Look at her vital signs," chimed urgently. "Heart rate, adrenaline levels, neural activity. They're all beyond normal human parameters." Santos reached the main passenger area where the pirates had gathered their captives. Children huddled against their parents while criminals debated which ones looked most valuable. The sight triggered something primal in the human warrior. She did not announce herself or demand surrender. She simply appeared in their midst like an avenging angel and began dismantling their operation with clinical efficiency. Pirates who had terrorized helpless civilians for years found themselves facing something they had never encountered, a human being who had decided that evil would not win today. The battle was over in minutes. When the smoke cleared, every pirate in the passenger area was down, and Santos was kneeling beside a wounded child, applying medical aid with gentle hands that had just delivered terrible violence to those who threatened innocence. "Serenity Dawn, this is Sergeant Santos. Passenger compartment secured. Beginning evacuation procedures." But her mission was not complete. The liner's reactor had been damaged in the initial attack and was approaching critical failure. Engineering reported complete loss of containment within minutes. The evacuation pods could not launch fast enough to save everyone. Santos made a decision that crystallized everything the aliens had learned about human mythology. She went to the reactor room alone. "Santos, what are you doing?" demanded over the communications channel. "My job," she replied calmly. Through her helmet camera, they could see her entering a section of the ship flooded with lethal radiation. Her suit's alarms screamed warnings about exposure levels that would kill most beings in minutes. Santos reached the reactor core and began manual containment procedures. Her hands moved over controls that were glowing white-hot with radioactive energy. The aliens watched her life signs spike beyond anything they thought could sustain biological function. "The exposure will kill you," Al transmitted urgently. "Maybe," Santos replied. She sounded strangely peaceful. "But 378 people will live. 47 children will grow up to have families of their own. That's what matters." For 12 minutes, Santos held that reactor together through sheer force of will and technical skill. She absorbed enough radiation to kill a dozen normal people while manually operating systems that required superhuman endurance and precision. Evacuation complete, the Bay Chief finally reported. All civilians aboard rescue vessels. Santos collapsed next to the reactor core, her mission complete. The aliens found her unconscious but alive when they reached the liner's medical bay hours later. The doctors said she should have been dead 10 times over from the radiation exposure. Instead, she woke up 3 days later asking about the rescued children. How, was all could ask when he visited her recovery bed. Santos smiled weakly. I told you, our myths aren't stories about impossible people. They're instruction manuals for what any human can become when we decide that something is worth dying for. She looked at each alien in turn. At Thermopylae, Murphy on his burning tank destroyer. The Warsaw Ghetto fighters. They weren't special humans. They were regular humans who chose to become legendary when legends were needed. Crystal structure pulsed with new understanding. Your entire species carries this potential. Every single one of us, Santos confirmed. We just need the right moment and the right cause. When innocent people need protecting, when freedom needs defending, when good needs to triumph over evil. Any human can access what you call the mythic state. We become whatever we need to be. Al's mandibles clicked with something that might have been awe. You are all potential heroes. We're all potential legends, Santos corrected. That's what our mythology teaches us. Not that some humans are special, but that all humans can become special when it matters most. Commander stood silently for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. Finally, he spoke with uncharacteristic humility. I would like to request permanent transfer to serve under human command, he said formally. We thought your myths made you weak, believing in impossible heroes. We were wrong. Your myths make you unlimited. Santos' smile was genuine now, warm and welcoming. Welcome to the good guys, Commander. Let me tell you about some of our other heroes. There's this story about a woman named of Ark. As she began another tale of impossible human achievement, the aliens settled in to listen. They were no longer hearing fantasies or delusions. They were receiving instruction manuals for what they might become themselves if they learned to think like humans. In a universe full of logical, measured species who calculated odds and followed doctrine, humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or numbers. It was the simple truth that when legends were needed, humans became legendary. The myths were real. They had always been real, and anyone willing to believe in them could become one themselves.